On this day in history, the 19th of November 1604, Richard Edes, Dean of Worcester, royal chaplain, poet, playwright, and one of the scholars chosen to help translate the King James Bible, died at Worcester. He was just 50 years old, and his death came only months after that great translation project began. Edes never lived to take part in the work that would make the English Bible one of the most famous books in the world. But his story gives us a glimpse into the fascinating world of Elizabethan and early Jacobean churchmen, men who preached before monarchs, wrote plays in Latin, and moved between the pulpit, the university, and the royal court. I'm historian and author Claire Ridgway, and let me tell you more about this scholar and churchman. Richard Edes was born on the Isle of Wight and baptised at Newport on the 23rd of January 1554. He was the eldest son of Lawrence Edes, a clothier, and his wife Alice James. It was a solid, respectable background, not noble, but one that valued learning, and Richard was clearly gifted. He attended Westminster School, one of the great training grounds for Tudor scholars, and in 1571 won a place as a student at Christ Church, Oxford. There he rose quickly, Bachelor of Arts by 1574, a Master's by 1578, and he began to make his name as a preacher of rare eloquence. Anthony Wood, the Oxford antiquarian, later called him a most noted and celebrated preacher. But Edes wasn't all sermons and study. In his youth, he had a creative streak, poetical fancies, as Wood put it. He composed Latin verse and even wrote plays, including a tragedy about Julius Caesar, performed at Christ Church in 1582. That's decades before Shakespeare's version, by the way. He also penned a witty Latin poem, Iter Boreali, The Northern Journey, a kind of travelogue in verse, describing a trip to Durham with his friend Toby Matthew, later Archbishop of York. Clearly, Edes had both intellectual polish and a sense of humour. His career in the church advanced steadily. In the 1580s, he took holy orders, becoming proctor of Oxford University, and he began collecting appointments, prebendary of Salisbury Cathedral, canon of Christ Church, and rector of Freshwater back on his native Isle of Wight. He also married Margaret Westphaling, daughter of Herbert Westphaling, the Bishop of Hereford, a match that surely helped his prospects. Through his father-in-law's influence, he became prebendary, then treasurer of Hereford Cathedral. And at court, Edes shone. He was appointed chaplain to Queen Elizabeth I, preaching before her often, and his sermons earned admiration for their learning and grace. Edes himself described his role as an office to which for some years I have been employed in this court under the religious reign of the peerless Queen of the world. The Queen was aware of her preacher's talents and his family's rise. She's even recorded as joking to Lady Walsingham that the Isle of Wight had provided her with 3 cousins who looked after her soul, body and goods. For her soul, Dr. Edes, her chaplain. For her body, Dr. James, her physician. And for her goods, Mr. Thomas Fleming, her mercer. All 3 were related, and all from the same corner of Newport. Edes's brilliance and connections caught the attention of powerful patrons, including Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, who tried to secure him the prestigious post of Dean of Christ Church, Oxford in the mid-1590s. That plan failed. Politics at Oxford were fierce, but Edes didn't lose out. In 1596, he was appointed treasurer of Christ Church, and the following year, Dean of Worcester. A few years later, in 1598, he was also presented to the rectory of Upton-upon-Severn, not far from Worcester itself. At Worcester, he proved a generous and energetic dean. He contributed funds to the new Bodleian Library at Oxford, and was remembered with gratitude by his cousin Thomas James, who became Bodley's first librarian. Edes's portrait even appeared among the great scholars in the Bodleian's painted frieze, an early sign of his lasting reputation as one of the university's finest churchmen. When James I came to the throne in 1603, Edes's star rose still higher. He continued as royal chaplain and was trusted enough to be appointed to one of the greatest intellectual tasks of the new reign, the translation of the Bible, the project that would become the King James Version. Edes was named to the Oxford group responsible for the 4 Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, and the Book of Revelation. It was a massive scholarly collaboration, and his appointment shows the level of esteem in which he was held. Tragically, he never lived to begin the work properly. On the 19th of November 1604, just as the translation project was gathering momentum, Richard Edes died at Worcester. He was buried in the cathedral, in the chapel at the east end of the choir, beneath a fine monument erected by his widow. His sermons were published after his death in 1604 and again in 1626, keeping his voice alive for a new generation of clergy. He was remembered as both a learned theologian and a man of letters, a preacher who could move a queen, and a poet who could make a congregation smile. So on this day, we remember Richard Edes, a man who stood at the crossroads of faith, learning and language, and whose early death reminds us how many quiet contributors lie behind the great works of history. If you enjoyed today's look at this lesser-known Tudor and Stuart figure, don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell for more Tudor history. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.